That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, it's Alabama's bye week, so we've talked a lot about South Carolina up to this point, reacting to that game. Obviously, wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but once again, Alabama found a way to win. Now it's the bye week, the second bye week, and we actually saw quite a few changes as far as guys who were getting opportunities. You know, Michael Carroll ended up getting a lot more opportunities post bye week. Will Sanders. So this second bye week, there's still things that Alabama needs to work on, and there's questions that Alabama fans have. And so we're going to be addressing some of those questions, and then also talking about guys that we maybe want to see a little bit more of post bye week when LSU rolls into town. And you got LSU, you got Oklahoma, Eastern Illinois, and you got Auburn. Not an easy slate left. So, you know, the grind continues. But first of all, what's your thoughts on Alabama so far this season, kind of as a bird's eye view?
Well, I hate dwelling on the negatives because the positives far outweigh the negatives. I mean, you're ranked fourth in the country. I was optimistic about this season. I said before the season started that Alabama would finish 10-2, but I didn't have Alabama winning the SEC or the national championship. And again, I had Alabama at 10-2. So I have to admit that the team has been better than I anticipated. So I'm really thrilled and very optimistic about this coaching staff and Kalen DeBoer, because they're just a little bit better than I thought they would be. So I don't want to dwell on the negative because, again, the team has somewhat exceeded my expectations, although we'll see. I mean, 10-2 is still 10-2, and not winning a championship of any kind is very much in play. But what's also in play is winning the SEC and even making a run at the big one in the playoff. I think that's in play too. In terms of what's been a positive on offense, it's throwing the football has been outstanding, particularly when sometimes big numbers come because you get a lot of cheap ones deep. This team doesn't get any cheap ones deep, yet the passing numbers are really good. That's outstanding. The receiving corps has lived up to the hype. Ty has exceeded all expectations, even the high ones. Everything is good on offense except the run game has been abysmally bad. I mean, it's abysmally bad. And we'll address that a lot today. Defensively, Clint, more consistent than I expected. What I love about this defense is they don't give up a lot of points. Very few, actually. They don't give up a lot of points, which is about the best thing you can say for a defense, really. Yet at the same time, I wouldn't say that they've been necessarily fantastic. There's still a lot of room to improve on defense. I think the defense can be even better than they are, but they've been good. ESPN says, hey, it's the 15th most efficient defense in the country. I think there's enough season left, Clint, for them to prove they're a top 10 defense. To me, that's a label that I love, right? Top 10 defense. That means that's elite. If you're top 10, there's 135 teams. If you're top 10, you're elite. I think this defense is just outside of that, but they can still improve with a handful of individual players I would like to see make leaps forward in their development down the stretch. But defense, very good. Offense, good. If I'm giving them a grade, I give them the same grade. I think on offense, it's a B, and on defense, it's a B. And I just say that because A, to me, means elite. I don't think either unit's elite. I think they're just outside of it. But C, D, and F are off the table. They're way better than that. And all that's really left is a B. So let's maybe even say B plus for both units so far, exceeding expectations and a very good team, but flawed. And we'll dwell on the flaws later in the show.
Yeah, I completely agree with just about all of that. I mean, I feel like that right now, when you look at Alabama defensively, they do have some flaws, but think about Deontay Lawson was not 100% coming into the season. We didn't really know if he would be 100% all season because of, coming off of an ACL injury like that. Like, you don't know exactly, or a knee injury. You don't know exactly how long it's going to be a problem, or at least limit the player somewhat. You talk about Tim Keenan having to miss time, Jeremiah Beaming going out for the season, Quay Russaw missing significant time. You talk about A lot of different players. You got new guys who have been coming in. Keon Sabb was still coming back from an injury, a season-ending injury. Even in fall camp, he was still somewhat limited. You had true freshmen all over the place who were contributing or needing to be relied on. Dijon Lee. If you would have said going into the season, like Damani Jackson was not going to have a great year, Deshaun Jones was going to be very up and down, I would have been very concerned. If you would have said Quay Rusall is going out, not for the season, but pretty much for the season. You talk about Jeremiah Beeman, a guy who we thought was going to be a critical rotational piece for Alabama and knows him going out for the year. Like all these things, I would have been very concerned about the defense. And yet, overall, you're right. It hasn't been perfect. No, at times they do allow opposing offenses to have success, move the football, even in some ways, move the ball at will at times. But when they really need to get stops or they really need to get turnovers, they've been pretty good about both. And so I think that that's been very critical. There's no doubt about it. Talking about the defense and just how things have continued to kind of transpire, I love the fact that you do get those really timely turnovers. That's something that over the course of last season, you started to see more and more. This year, it seems to be the same way. And I think that that's making a significant difference on the outcome of games. I mean, Alabama just last week, that turnover late in the game again on Lenore Sellers forcing that fumble, that went from Alabama doing a miraculous thing offensively, scoring a touchdown and getting a 2-point conversion. But South Carolina was kind of in the driver's seat with the ability to go down the field, see if they could get in field goal range. And if not, now you're in overtime and it's really anybody's game. Instead, the defense forces a turnover. They give Alabama's offense in their own territory the ability to now control the game. And instead of having to kick a field goal, they score a touchdown. That ended up, being the difference in the game. So it's like, I love how this defense is playing overall. I think Kane Womack, he's building depth on that side of the football, and there's talent. So I really like how the defense complements the offense.
Yeah, and again, I find this, I'm going to harp on this particular set of stats, but I find it really interesting that on the analytics that ESPN delves into, they rank teams based on efficiencies, as they call it, and I'm sure it's some formula I would never understand because I'm terrible at math. But ESPN says Alabama's got the 15th most efficient offense in the country. They have the 15th most efficient defense in the country. That's pretty amazing, especially when you factor in the only teams ahead of Alabama and both that are more efficient than Alabama on both sides of the ball is the three Big Ten teams, Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon. But I'd point out that Alabama's done that against, per ESPN, the nation's fourth best schedule. And those Big Ten teams have not played a schedule like that. So Alabama has been, I think, the offense is just below elite. The defense is just below elite. But when you combine that together, that both units are that good and just outside of elite, it's a pretty elite team because the offense is helping you win games and the defense is helping you win games. The offense, let's be honest. I'm an analytics fan, but I don't care for the super deep dives. I think we can make it too complicated at times. In the end, to me, this game is still about points and yards. Alabama's offense scored more points last year, and Alabama's offense, produced more yardage last year. It's fair, I think, to argue, well, last year's offense was better. They scored more points. I think that's fair. But I also think that it's not accurate. This offense is better than last year's. I know there's fewer points. I know there's struggles. I know the run game is abysmal. Last year's run game was not because the quarterback was running for 1 billion yards. This year, the offense run game is more abysmal, but the offense is better. Why? Efficient. There's far fewer 3 and outs. There's more time of possession. The offense is giving the other team less opportunities to possess the ball and score because they've got the ball. They don't turn the ball over and give games away. Last year's offense did. That's why this offense is better. Last year's offense was sometimes helping the other team. This offense doesn't. This offense is requiring the opposition to beat the defense because they're not going to get any breaks from the offense. They also have a punter the offense, if you want to call him an offensive player, and he acts like it most of the time, the offense as a punter, it's averaging over 44 yards a punt. So that again is forcing the defense, the opposition, to earn what they make. And the defense is doing the same way. They don't give up a lot of cheap ones. They're not a wall, but they don't give up a lot of cheap ones. They do give up a few, but it's college football. That's impossible not to. But overall, Clint, this is just a really good football team. And even though neither unit is elite, in my opinion, the team is pretty elite. It is a top 10 football team, ranked fourth, playing the nation's fourth toughest schedule. I think, you use the word complement a lot and describe a lot of that really well. I think all these units complement each other, and while it all adds up to, this is an elite football team 8 games into the season.
Yeah, I know one big concern for fans with the defense is the inability to tackle at times. That is a concern. I do also want to point out, and some people might want it differently. You might rather have the more consistent tackling teams, but I think, when you're playing Lenora Sellers, he's going to break tackles regardless of how you try to tackle him. But what you end up getting in some of these instances is the way that they put such an emphasis on stripping the football, getting the football out. Sometimes it's going to lead to more poor tackling because you're trying to rip the football out instead of worrying about securing a sound tackle. Now, obviously, Kane Womack wants both, and he tries to teach it in a way where you can do both. It just doesn't always play out that way on the field. So then it becomes, what do you covet more, getting the guy down or stripping the football, getting the football out? Now, granted, if you were to ask Kane Womack which is more important to him, I would venture to say that probably getting the guy down would be more important because you're doing that a lot more often. But at the same time, once again, if a guy's breaking multiple tackles and he's going to be doing it regardless, even when you've got guys who are emphasizing tackling first, then, yeah, you might get a couple of more tackles, but then also those chances of Deontay Lawson stripping the football out in a very critical moment of the game on that quarterback that had been breaking tackles all game, that maybe doesn't or probably doesn't happen. You talk about Diego Pavia and Justin Jefferson down near the goal line when they're about to start going up, at least 10, maybe 14 points. Obviously, stripping the football then was a critical piece of how that ended up playing out. So there's some good and bad. There's some give and take, and people are going to feel differently about it. But that is, Kane Womack puts an emphasis on turnovers, and I think that they have the guys, whether it be guys who have a knack for stripping the football or guys who can get their hands on it with an interception. They have guys who can generate turnovers. So I think that is very beneficial. That if they could ever, now granted, on offense, they have that ball control mentality. They didn't against South Carolina. They weren't able to do it against South Carolina. A lot of 3-and-outs, a lot of problems offensively. We'll be getting to that soon. But typically, they've been very ball control, which has been very complimentary to the defense. It has helped the defense. But if your offense is able to be efficient and score on its possessions efficiently, then when you can create those turnovers, 1, 2, that can be the separation you need. And that might be why Alabama's playing a lot of very close games, but they're winning those games. That's a pretty big difference. So that's at least something to keep in mind. Who are some guys defensively right now? Obviously, Yanze Pierre is emerging. He's kind of, he would have been a guy who early on, maybe you see flashes of and you say, man, I'd love to see him play a little bit more. But it was more of the Quay Rousseau injury that forced him into a bigger role, and he has just flourished with it, in my opinion. But who are some guys defensively, maybe not through that route, through injury, but just based off of what you've seen, you would like to see a little bit more post-bye week?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think in the starting lineup or in terms of who we consider that front group that there's been too many surprises. To me, the biggest one has been Dijon Lee. And I say that because I'm not surprised Dijon is good. I'm not surprised Dijon's good quickly. I would have easily predicted both of those things. Plus, he was around for the spring. We already knew this. But the fact that Dijon, think about that, Dijon had to leapfrog Cam Calhoun to be in the role he's in, who was an experienced college football player at both Michigan and Utah. He had to leapfrog him and then beat out Damani Jackson, who I believe this. I believe Damani was one of the better cornerbacks in the country coming into this season. Now, Damani, for whatever reason that I have no idea how, maybe it's injury, I don't know, but Damani's taken a step back. And it did take that. But I think Dijon Lee becoming one of the best cornerbacks in the SEC, that's literally what I think he is right now. I know that sounds crazy, but I really believe that. Right now, Dijon Lee is one of the better, I didn't say the best, one of the better cornerbacks in this league. That's a surprise to me. And it should surprise anyone because he's a true freshman, again, who he had to beat out just to get the role. And then we saw what PFF, raved. I mean, his coverage grade against South Carolina was unbelievable. But we shouldn't be surprised that Zabian's good, and Bray and Keon and Deshaun Jones holding on to Husky. It's not surprised me. I sort of saw that coming. The three inside linebackers had a lot of experience. So I'd say Yanze and Dijon are the biggest surprises. Now, there's twos that I would like to see play a bigger role. The one I want to bring up is Keon Keeley. I mean, I think Alabama still lacks a little bit in pass rush. I said earlier this week, to some level of controversy, I think he's become the second best pass rusher on the team. I think you can easily argue that if you look at the numbers, how many plays he's made versus how many snaps he's played. I mean, he's making more plays per his snaps than basically anyone in the front seven, maybe Yanze. But I would like to see Keon Keeley have a larger snap share, and continue to evolve in his role. I also like London Simmons and Edric Hill in for Keenan and James Smith, who deserve to be the starters, but I think London Simmons and Edric Hill in particular are playing well. And one thing I would like to see, I don't think it improves the team, but I do think getting QB Reese some snaps, I see him as a potential starter next year, and I would like him to have as much experience as possible, realizing he's well behind the other three inside linebackers. But I think QB could be a starter on next year's team, and I would like to see him play a little bit more. But defensively, to me, my surprises are I'm getting more than I expected from Yanze Pierre, who's been arguably the best player on the defense, which is crazy to say, but arguably he is in that mix along with Hubbard and Justin Jefferson, I think, for best players on this defense. And just Dijon Lee being this good and starting, considering who he had to beat out. And those are the surprises to me, although none of it shocks me because I think me and you both, I mean, we were high on Pierre and Dijon Lee. We're not like stunned that they're good. I'm just stunned that they're this good right now.
I think I'll fully admit Yanze being as good as he has been setting the edge.
Yeah,
that has surprised me.
Yes.
I knew that he had some juice as a pass rusher and he could do some good things there, but just his ability to stop the run. And then granted, he hasn't been perfect at it. He hadn't been the best edge setter I've ever seen. I'm saying that he's a very capable edge setter and a very capable player against the run, which was by far my biggest question mark for him as a player. And that has been great to see because even last year, I said against Wisconsin last year when he played, he got in earlier than I was expecting in that game. And there was one rep in particular. I'm like, man, he set a hard edge here. Like, this is encouraging. But then as the season progressed and he still continued to play some, I didn't really see that consistently. So I guess he already started to flash it. And now he's just gotten more consistency. But I will say that has been a very pleasant surprise and a very critical surprise. Because I'll go ahead and tell you, Justin Hill is a very good player, or he's going to be a very good player, very good skill set, loves what he brings to the table, versatility, comfortable playing off the ball, comfortable playing in space, can convert speed to power as a pass rusher, very willing as far as trying to set the edge. I think he's still, as far as playing off the ball, you see him getting in the same gap. He's running underneath blocks as far as things coming out to the perimeter when he needs to be getting over the top and leveraging the football back inside. He's still dealing with some of those issues. And so if he had to be the guy, I don't think he's ready to be the guy. I think that's why you've seen a little bit more of Noah Carter as well. And I don't think Noah Carter is like blowing anybody away right now, but he's getting valuable reps, and we'll see how he continues to develop. It's one of those situations where you look at Chris Braswell, you look at Yanze Pierre. These are guys who took a couple of years to really start to find their footing, but as they did that, they became really good players for Alabama. The Noah Carters of the world, give them a chance and wait and see what happens, because I think that is a possibility down the line as well. But Yanze is definitely he's been great. Keon Keeley was watching him a little bit more closely, just seeing, okay, what type of impact. I do think there are limitations as far as from a technical standpoint. As far as being a pass rusher, there's nothing that I look at and I say this is what he does well. But at the same time, he's a hustle player as a pass rusher, and as far as being big and strong, I mean, you can tell that some of the juice from getting as big as he has gotten has been zapped. If they were planning to play him more as a situational pass rusher rather than trying to be an actual bandit, a 3 down, every down guy, I really wish they would have kind of let him stay a little bit lighter. Being 283, 284, whatever it is, 282, him being 265, being a bigger body guy. Jordan Renaud, he's not massive, not nearly as big as Keeley is from a size perspective, but he plays quite a bit. And granted, I think he's a little bit better as far as edge setting and being a run defender, core strength, all those things. I think he's a little bit more advanced, but I would have loved to have seen Keeley probably stay around 260, 265 and let him have a little bit more juice and twitch off the edge if that's what you were going to primarily do with him. Now, granted, that might have been something that they just decided to do throughout the season, but hopefully he continues to grow and develop as like an every down player where he can continue to contribute. But I certainly think that based off of the way that you're seeing him start to trend, he would be a player who, I would suspect would end up having some sort of maybe not increased role from an every down, rotate in for an entire series type of situation, but some sort of increased role where maybe he'll get some added opportunities.
Yeah, I see even him being bandit too isn't crazy right now. I mean, which would mean more snaps than Jordan Renaud. And boy, before the season started, I'd have told you, well, there's no way that's going to happen. But I'm just saying, I think his production on a per snap basis has been better than Renaud's, although some of Renaud's production is hidden. I say this all the time on defense. So true. I know you agree with this. Anybody would, but sometimes on defense, you make a great play and they don't enter anything on the stat sheet. You get no
Right.
stat. You earned no stat, but you made a great play and you heavily contributed to the play being blown up because you contained or you owned your area. You beat your man. Sometimes you can have a win up front that influences now the ball has to go somewhere else. We wanted the ball to go this way, but this dude was in our way, so we had to go back the other way. And that guy doesn't get any stat, but he blew up the play. That happens all the time on defense. And I do think when I say Jordan Renaud hasn't been productive, I think Renaud is that way. I think he influences the outcomes of some plays that he doesn't necessarily get a stat for, but he might be better than Keeley in that sense. But in terms of denting the stat sheet, Keeley's been better than Renaud on a play-by-play basis. So I don't think it's crazy for Keeley to move up to what I would call bandit 2. And LT Overton is one of the guys on defense. Hopefully the whole defense is piled around their laptop or their phone listening to the show. Hopefully they are, because we'll give them a pep talk here. But some guys on defense need a step up over the stretch of the season. And LT Overton's one of these guys. I mean, it needs to be even better. It's been fine. It's been fine. It needs to be better. James Smith plays in flashes, looks fantastic, but great players don't play in flashes. They're good every snap. Deontay Lawson getting healthier, I think, is going to be big for this defense. And maybe Keon Sabb being a little more maybe active as a playmaker. I think Keon does his job, which is, hey, that's a big part of it, right? I think he's a good do your job guy. But you also need the guys that go one step further that make the plays to win the game. Like Deontay Lawson last week made a play to win the game. Deshaun made a play to win the game. I think Keon Sabb one step forward. Now, he also didn't start out this year 100% healthy. I think he was still recovering from missing the spring and having that injury that he had last fall, but is probably getting healthier now. And again, I see big things ahead for the defense. They need to play well, because here's a point I want to make about this stretch drive, Clint. And I didn't really think about this until today, so it's sort of an original thought for me on this Wednesday. these last 3 defensive coordinators that we're playing, and I'm going to count Venables as a defensive coordinator here. I know he's the head coach, but he sort of
Right.
rules the roost on that defense. You're playing Brad Baker from LSU, Venables from Oklahoma, and DJ Durkin at Auburn. You need to assume the offense isn't going to have a point palooza against any of that bunch.
And if you end up having success against those 3 and you win all 3 games, you beat Eastern Illinois, guess what your prize is? Texas A&M and their defense. So
that's exactly right. So who's got to answer for that? You'll say, well, the offense needs to step it up. No, the defense does, because you need to assume that getting around 21 or 24 might be all there is against Baker and Venables and Durkin. Those are as good as it gets in college football in terms of a DC mind, and they'll come up with a great plan for an Alabama offense. So the defense has to get even better at Alabama, realizing, hey, our offense may only have 20, 21, 24, and we still got to win those games. So as much as we're about to talk about the run game and how it needs to improve, I think the defense has been good, close to elite, needs to be elite down the stretch, because the offense is going to have its hands full with these last 3 SEC opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, and I think that Brent Venables in Oklahoma in particular, they do such a good job of. I mean, granted, they are notoriously known for being able to get those signs, and I don't say that as they do it illegally.
Yeah,
I'm saying
that Stallions.
Correct. But that's one thing, Ryan Grubb and company will need to be weary of, but they do a very good job. That's not the game you want to go into limited. Jalen Milroe was limited as a player last year, and they fully exploited his limitations. Brent Venables and that staff do a really good job with that. Same situation this year. If you go in and you don't have a run game to speak of, you don't have a vertical passing game, Brent Venables and that defense, they can really hone in on what you do well, and they can really make life difficult. So, that is something to definitely keep in mind. And the fact that it's going to be in Tuscaloosa, that helps from a home field advantage against their offense, but the defense isn't going to have any communication issues going against Alabama's offense because the crowd's not going to be going crazy. Defense travels for that reason. So it's just there should be no problems on that front for them. So you've got to get some of these issues fixed. But before we move on to the offense, because that would have been a great transition, but I do at least want to point out, just for a guess, and you might know this, you might not. Who do you think is the Jan Zapier is number 1 as far as pressures? LT Overton is number 2. Who would you venture to guess is number 3?
I think it's who'd you say was okay? 1 is Pierre and 2 is Overton.
Yes.
Lawson's
4 and not far behind. So that was a great guess. That's probably where I would have went with it based off of how he's been performing. It was kind of shocking to me.
Is it Jefferson?
It is not. It is Edric Hill, who, right now, 97 pass rush snaps versus 167 for Overton and 146 for Pierre. And granted, Pierre's way ahead of everybody with 29 pressures. LT Overton has 18, but Edric Hill has 12. Like, I think he's been really good as a run defender. He's been surprisingly good. Now, granted, the lack of size can hurt him at times, but I think he's done a great job as far as using he's not like super tall. I think he's got a good pad level. He uses leverage well. He understands leverage. But him as a pass rusher, like, he's been a pretty good complementary rotational piece playing in that role, whether it be, as a 3 tech, whether it be bumping a little bit further outside, playing a 4-eye, playing a 4, playing a 5. He's been pretty good across the board, man.
It may be small, maybe too small. I'm getting ahead of myself here. It may be too small. But would it excite you if I said the starting defensive line in 2026 is Keon Keeley, Edric Hill, and James Smith?
Yeah.
A year better from where they are, because they're all going to be 1 year better from where they are right now.
Yeah, 100%.
That would be a playmaking unit. They're going to dent the stat sheet more than hold the line. Now, it might be a little small. They might get run over a little bit. James Smith is good size, but Edric's on the small side. Keon Keeley, for a down lineman, he's not 300 pounds. I'm just saying that I could get excited about that. That stat blew me away, man. But
yeah.
I'm shocked But now that you say it and explain it, I guess I shouldn't be. And it's not like he's racking up pressures to the point. I mean, 12's not a lot.
Right.
I
Yeah.
thought it
Yeah.
might
One
be
and a half
Lawson.
a game.
I
One
thought it
and a
might be
half.
Lawson because we're playing Lawson a little more in a pressure role. He's just playing more of a pressure role. I think they like sometimes when Lawson, Jefferson, and Hill Green are all on the field at the same time. And when that happens, Deontay's the one that's usually outside, and sometimes he just plays outside because that's where they like him. But I imagine by the end of the year is what I'm saying. I think Lawson will probably finish the season third ahead of Hill, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that um, Hill, he went the first 2 games without a pressure. He only had one against Wisconsin. In SEC play, he's had 11 of his 12 pressures. So
There
in
you go.
5 SEC games, he's averaging over 2 per game. So that's
It's
yeah,
development. These guys not only get better year to year, they get better as they play more.
yeah, and I mean, I will say like there's been in SEC play, I don't think he's been as good of a run defender necessarily. Even though the last couple of weeks I thought he was pretty good stopping the run, but that is something definitely to mention. And then QB Reese, you were talking about him. Definitely think he's a guy that I would love to see get opportunities. You're having a hard time as far as I think that with the way Lawson's starting to play, he feels like a 3-down guy. The guy Hill Green's getting better. He deserves a role. Or you're taking Justin Jefferson off the field. There's going to be times where you have all three on the field at the same time. But I think that it's going to be really difficult to get QB Reese any sort of significant action. But if you can, especially in those mop-up duty moments, he should be one of the first guys that you're getting onto the field if you are in control in any of these football games, which I guess at this point, maybe Eastern Illinois, but the rest of them, I don't know. I don't think you can assume that with any of them. Kelby Collins is another one who I would like to see. I think he's doing a pretty good job as far as being a run defender. Yeah, and just his impact continues to grow as the season progresses. So I would like to see a little bit more of him at whose expense, because I like those core 4 defensive linemen that you got. Plus, I think Isaiah Faga is going to continue to get, a few snaps here or there. But I do think that Kelby Collins is emerging as that 5th defensive lineman, and he's doing a pretty good job. He can, in those 3-man fronts, he can kick out and play that kind of 3-4 end. He can also play as far as over the tackle in those 4-man fronts. So like what he's doing and how he's progressing, we'd like to see him a little bit more as well. But the offense is something that I know a lot of people are wanting to talk about. The run game has been, to me, it was trending in the right direction. Prior to that concussion for Jam Miller against Missouri, I thought it was, you saw the flashes against Georgia. You saw significant improvement against Vanderbilt and actually was able to run the football very effectively against the Commodores. Then you go to Missouri, and they're running the football well against that front as well. And then, the concussion happens, and Tennessee didn't really get it from him. You got it some second half from Daniel Hill, but then South Carolina happened. Now, I do want to point out to people, a lot of Alabama's offense was off of its game against South Carolina. Ty Simpson wasn't playing up to his standard. The wide receivers, everybody, Jeremy Bernard's dropping footballs. Pretty much every pass catcher had a drop in that game, it felt like. So to think, well, maybe the offensive line was kind of off of its game as well. Maybe the running backs were a little bit off of their game as well as far as seeing the holes and things like that. Maybe this was easily a step back. I mean, you can't sit there and say, oh, everything's fine. We'll just ignore this data point. But on a day where not a whole lot was going right for the offense in general, maybe this particular game should not be as big of a concern as we're making it out to be, but it has been a massive topic of conversation for fans, so I definitely wanted to talk about it.
Well, I feel like the run game's bottomed out. And by that, it's been an issue. It hasn't been good. And let me tell you there's a couple things that are pretty dreadful. And by the way, I'm not blaming the running backs totally here, but I am looking at their numbers. And I don't have in front of me this off memory, but Jam Miller's under 4 yards a carry. Kevin Riley's under 4 yards a carry. I think Richard Young's under 2 yards a carry. Or around 2 yards. Dre Washington has 4 yards a carry, but on very limited work. And A.K. Deer's numbers are crazy high compared to everybody else, but he's only carried the ball 7 times all year and is clearly redshirting. So he's not really part of the deal here. Daniel Hill is also, the savior of the offense, under 4 yards a carry. And I'm talking about for the season. Those numbers are terrible. Really dreadfully bad. The longest run of the year from the running backs is from A.K. Deer in the Monroe game in garbage time against Monroe. He had a 56-yard run. The second longest run of the whole year in 8 games from any of the running backs other than that AK Deer run is 22 yards. I mean, it's just dreadfully bad. The production from running back has been pretty much non-existent. And that's got to be addressed. Is it the running back's fault? No, but I think some, of course, some. I think the offensive line shares some of the blame, all the shuffling and only really having 2 guys they truly depend and trust on, the 2 that never come out. Brailsford and Proctor, really good players. The other 3 come out, so they don't, there's a rotation there. But I think the biggest factor, and we've brought this up before, but it's huge, but I think the biggest factor is you've gotten away from 12 personnel. They played a lot of 12 personnel last year because Milroe was a quarterback. The primary offensive play last year was Jalen Milroe running the ball. Like, the primary play this year is Ty Simpson throwing it in the short and intermediate range. That's the primary thing. They've gotten away from 12 personnel. They do that very little compared to last year when they did it most of the time. And you've not only gotten away from using 2 tight ends, the tight end you use is not the blocker that either one of those 2 guys were last year. And I like Josh Cuevas, but Cuevas is a pass first tight end. He's really good running routes and catching the ball. He's less good at I'm going to line up on the line of scrimmage and set an edge. That's not really his thing. So I think that's the primary reason the run game has struggled. I also think factor in the offensive line's not great at blocking, run blocking. The backs aren't special. There's a lack of year-round commitment to run the ball when it's DeBoer and Grubb and they want to throw the ball. And the defenses you're playing, by the way, you're playing the 4th toughest schedule in the country. It ain't easy to run the ball against any of these people. Notice they ran it pretty good against Monroe, but that's not who you're playing every week. So I think it's all of those things, and I'm curious to know if you think it's all that and more, and what we're going to do to fix it. I don't think the running game will be, quote, fixed. We're not going to run for 250 against LSU, Oklahoma, or Auburn. I don't think so. I don't think that's in this group. I don't think they can. I'd love if they prove me wrong. That would be awesome. But I don't think they can. I don't think you're going to fix this. I think all you have to do is get enough production to where play action still is effective. Keep doing it. Be stubborn about it so that play action remains effective. And that's sort of all that I'm asking.
Whether it's keeping play action effective, or it's just saying, hey, if you want to do the split safety stuff, if you want to go too high, we're going to make you pay for it to some extent. But we might not be able to make you pay for it consistently, but we're going to make you pay for it enough where you have to think twice wanting to do it. As far as the vertical passing game, it's making teams pay. Hey, if you want to go single high, we'll make you pay for it. We got guys that can get open downfield. We got a quarterback that can get it to them. We're going to make you pay for it. Like, that's just something that those 2 things, they're not making teams pay enough, in my opinion, based off of the looks that they're giving them. And they're letting them focus in a little bit too much as far as the short to intermediate passing game. And it's like, okay, if you can stop that, then you can, or limit that, you can limit this Alabama offense. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to limit it for 4 quarters, but it's kind of like against South Carolina. There were drives where Ty Simpson had a lot of success, and they were able to move the football and put up points, but it wasn't consistent. If you're a team that can score yourself, then it's all about, hey, how do we get stops against this Alabama offense? That's what we're looking to do. And if you can do that fairly consistently because you can hone in on their short to intermediate passing game, then that's not a good thing if you're Alabama. That's the first thing I'll say. As far as the running backs are concerned, I think that you can't tell me that Daniel Hill's not as talented as Dylan Johnson. You can't tell me Jim Miller's not as talented as Dylan Johnson. I think that they're the type to overcome the other issues, the obstacles? No, then that's what you're talking about. And a guy like Xavier Crowell, he would be able to probably compensate and still make some things happen that just these other backs wouldn't be able to do. But I think that they should be having a lot more success. When you look at this team on paper and what they've got, they should be having a lot more success, and they're not. And when I go and watch, I think it's a combination of individual pieces on the offensive line. It's spread out pretty evenly, which is why, coaching has to come into play at that point because, and I love Coach Cap. I want to, preface this by saying I think he is a great human being, a great person. And if there's a coach I'm pulling for on this coaching staff, Cap is at or near the top. I love that man. But, we also need to talk about the lack of production from the offensive line. I think some of the problems in pass protection, you can't help. It's the body types you got. It's what they do well. You had a left tackle who was out a huge chunk of the offseason. He wasn't able to drop a bunch of weight. He's probably a guard on the next level. So it's some of that's understandable. The lack of run game success, and sometimes that's just the offensive identity. It's what you practice, you perform on game day. And I don't think Alabama, it was very physical practices. Don't get me wrong. It's not a lack of physicality or want to be physical, but it's just how they probably call things is, that might be limiting in some ways. But when you actually watch the pieces, it's never really the same guy, but there's always one that's not getting his job done. And that's tight end or that's offensive line related. Sometimes it's Parker Brailsford. Sometimes it's Geno Vandermark. Sometimes, a little bit more rarely, it's Caden Proctor in the run game. It's Cam Dewberry. It's Jaden Roberts at times. It's Wilkin Formby. It's Michael Carroll.
It's like they take turns having one bad snap, and all it takes is one bad snap.
Every time I turn on the tape,
one player not doing his job, all it takes is one.
Every time I turn on the tape and I'm watching, I'm like, man, this guy didn't get the job done. And it resulted in these running backs getting hit in the backfield or right at the line of scrimmage a lot of the times. And you can have, if you're Daniel Hill, you can have 2 5-yard gains for 10 yards. That's solid and respectable. But then if you get tackled for a 2-yard loss, now you got 3 carries for 9 yards. You're averaging less than 3 yards a carry. So like that to me is what is really hindering when you look at the numbers. And that's why I say it's not really the running backs, because it's not like, maybe occasionally they miss a hole, because I do think there's opportunities for Jam Miller. I think he's a little bit too patient at times. He lets the blocks set up, and sometimes that's beneficial. Other times there's creases and opportunities there, and you're not hitting the hole like you need to. You're being a little bit too patient. I would like to see him get a better feel for that, but that is a problem as well. But overall, the offensive line, like, they have to get it fixed. Now, before I let you respond to that, because I do want to go ahead and get to this. Anytime someone pushes back, I'm not going to sit here and say, you're absolutely 100% wrong, without going to double check or triple check my work. And what I will say is when I go back and I watch these all 22 films, I'll normally watch both sides at least a couple of times every week. But I am focusing on the broader picture. I don't go back and watch every rep that the left guard takes, and then I go back and watch every rep that the left tackle takes. It's more of a collective thing. So there's something that you said in the last episode that we got some pushback on. I didn't push back on it at the time because in a lot of ways I agreed. And that was the comment about the Geno Vandermark, Jaden Roberts. Yeah. And, I understand what you were saying. You at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like you were saying that everybody wanted Jaden Roberts to be inserted into the starting lineup. And they felt like if they'll just do that and they'll just put Michael Carroll in there, problem solved. And your point was not necessarily that Jaden Roberts was the reason that it didn't continue to work, but that they made that change. And from an overall production standpoint, you really didn't see a whole lot of a difference. Correct. What I will say is that the tackle struggled in pass protection. The interior guy struggled with the run blocking. And what my mistake was, before going back and I watched every single rep that Jaden Roberts took, because I respect the people who comment on our channel. I want to give them, the opportunity because I'm not always going to be right. We have very intelligent, very informed listeners and people who watch the show. So when there was multiple people push back on that, I said, let me go watch Jaden Roberts. And I watched every single snap. And I will say I grouped him in with the other two from a struggling standpoint when I shouldn't have. Was he perfect? No. Some of that I still stand by. He missed a couple of assignments. He didn't really in pass protection, but there were a couple of times where he had some issues. But overall, man, when I watch just him, I'm like, man, every time the guy's pretty much doing it. I would say if I had to guess, he easily graded out as the best offensive lineman Alabama had against South Carolina. And so I went ahead and grouped him with the other two because Parker Brailsford struggled and Cam Dewberry damn sure struggled. And granted, give South Carolina's defensive front a lot of credit because those interior guys, they were monsters. But Jaden Roberts, for the people that push back on that, I wanted to acknowledge that I think you're 110% right. Also, something that you said, Jimmy, it was you feel like probably when they get back from the bye week, it'll probably go back to being a 50-50 split. That's not you saying that they should do that.
No.
You're predicting what they will do. They have had a very
Yeah,
and it's just essentially saying, hey, they've been very committed to Geno. They probably won't change that. But what I will say,
it's up to me. I'd play Jaden Roberts most of the time because I think he's got the higher ceiling, and the more he plays, the better he's going to get. And he's sort of playing his way into shape after missing so much practice time.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm right there with you. In fact, based off of what I saw, I would leave Jaden Roberts at right guard until now. Granted, a lot of times when he's going against Monkel Goodwin, it was the other guy that I thought was the way more impactful player, and Jaden didn't have to go against him nearly as much as Cam Dewberry. But even when he was going against that guy, I thought he would, for the most part, he was holding up extremely well. So, while I do think that Jaden probably drew the easiest assignment when you talk about their front, as far as the majority of the time, with the way that he performed and the experience that he's got, and the fact that you put him out there for 100% of the snaps, and at the end of that game, I didn't see him sucking air or struggling from a conditioning standpoint. He looks like he's ready to go. I would go ahead and make the commitment to him. Now, granted, if you've tried to make a transition a little bit to Michael Carroll, didn't work out. He wasn't performing, and this is a performance-based offense. If you're not performing, they'll get somebody in there and see if they can do the job. But for now, if I'm going into that LSU game, me personally, not necessarily saying I think this is going to happen. This is what I would do, and they damn sure ain't going to listen to me. But it would be to play Jaden Roberts definitely a majority of the time, and I wouldn't be upset if they went ahead and committed to him 100% of the time until he proves that performance is not what you're going to get from him each and every week, or at least anything close to that.
No, you explained it great. My overall point really wasn't critical of Jaden at all. It was critical of people who said if you took Vandermark out and put Roberts in, the problems are solved. That was not the case whatsoever.
Right.
Because Roberts played 100% of the snaps, Geno played none, and Alabama still continued to have problems getting the other team blocked, especially in the run game. That I didn't mean to imply that, well, Jaden's not very good. That's not what I was saying at all. I'm just saying that replacing Geno with Jaden did not suddenly improve the offensive line. It's still
now what I will say,
on a snap-to-snap basis.
And that's the way I took it when you said it. But yeah. I will say, just to clarify here, the right guard position 100% improved with Jaden Robertson there compared to especially what I saw from Geno Vandermark against Tennessee specifically. He really struggled, and that was both left and right guard. He played both in that game. But I will say you're 100% right. The offensive line and the overall production did not improve. Right guard did. And that's why I say, hey, if that's a position that you can get solidified, go ahead and make that move. You're going to leave Parker Brailsford at center. You're going to leave Caden Proctor at left tackle, and you expect good play out of them. I think there's limitations due to size from Parker Brailsford, and I guess due to size being too big from Caden Proctor, but you trust those guys. And I think Jaden Roberts, with the way he performed against South Carolina in a hostile environment, I would go ahead and give him the opportunity to be that third, and then it's like left guard and right tackle, which has kind of been by far the two biggest problematic areas for Alabama.
Yeah, to me on offensive linemen, there's two main factors: ability and experience. Jaden has both to me. Jaden has both. I mean, I see a lot of high-end ability, and he's a real experienced guy. He's played more, to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure it's true. He's played more than Dewberry has. I mean, Dewberry, I think, had 4 or 6 starts at A&M and quite a bit of snaps in between those starts. But overall, I think Jaden Roberts is probably one of the better guys on the offensive line that has both the ability and the experience. And other guys like Michael Carroll obviously lacks experience. I think some other guys that play probably don't have what I would call front line or front level NFL type ability, and they're out there and they're experienced players. But I'm with you. I think Alabama's best 5, are Formby, Roberts, Brailsford, Dewberry, Proctor, That's what I think is Alabama's best 5. But I'd still like to see Michael Carroll continue to get snaps at right tackle, just simply because the ability is otherworldly, and that's only going to get better as he plays more. It's not that's Michael Carroll needs to play, and he can help us. But I do think that, when they tried to go to Carroll to bigger snap share, it didn't necessarily work. But that's what I would do. Now, they're not going to ask me, and I wish they would sort of settle on some instead of all the switching out myself. But I get it. But it's great, especially with you backing up. Jade Roberts playing extremely well, or playing well enough against South Carolina. Certainly, his return is big. As we know, earlier in the season, he wasn't even available. So
Right.
some of these things are improving the offense. Daniel Hill's emergence, Jaden getting healthier. Danny Lewis, I know he missed South. It seemed like he was getting healthier, then a setback. But I sort of like Danny Lewis being able to be kind of a second guy, at tight end. I think is very helpful. Maybe, when you just talked about a great point you made about this wasn't the normal offense. Yeah, everybody was a little off. There were some pieces missing. Lottie Brooks was out. Zay Horton went out early. Ryan's kind of been fighting a little hamstring issue. Danny Lewis, he was out. This is Jade Roberts' first. Hey, you're full time playing 100% of all the snaps. Things were a little different. This is Daniel Hill's first game. If you think about it, as RB2. And he actually split snaps with Jam Miller. I mean, Daniel Hill's played, but that was his biggest role that he's played so far. Everything was a little different, and you're on the road. You've played 4 tough games in a row. I don't think we should be surprised at all that things were just a little off. But you know what they did? 10 minutes left to go in the game. The offense started really playing, and the offense won the game. I said, the offense, we sort of drove into the ditch a little bit. The offense drove us right out of the ditch, and the defense played 60 minutes of football, allowing the opportunity to come back and win. If the defense doesn't play well, the offense is too far behind to catch up. But the defense played pretty well for 60 minutes, but the offense played really well those final 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I'll say that I feel like what's unfortunate, the lack of tackle depth, the fact that like Olas, he survived at left tackle throughout the spring, but he's really a guard. And I think that you talk about the limitations with Caden Proctor, you talk about the limitations with Wilkin Formby. I think Olas Alinen would have every bit of those limitations in pass protection and athleticism as the other 2 guys. And so I don't think that while he is an emergency option, if you had to go to him, I don't think they want him being OT3. I don't think Jackson Lloyd is quite ready to assume that they are playing him a little bit. They're trying to get him some experience. Man, if he could come on, that would be very beneficial. I do think probably, I don't know if it'll end up being long term, but with the way that they've been recruiting at tackle, you've got some developmental pieces that I really, really like, by the way, but there's no sure thing there. You've got to get development. I could see Michael Carroll staying outside for the long haul. But what it's unfortunate to me, in my opinion, is if Wilkin really stepped up and become that dude at right tackle, and you didn't have to platoon. And if you had Jackson Lloyd who was ready, I think even if they just got that from Wilkin Formby, I think that they might even be willing to do something like this. But I would, in an ideal situation, Wilkin would have become what we all expected, or Jackson Lloyd would have been ready to assume, a starting role or a major role where, he can kick over to left tackle and you can put Wilkin back in there, or, whatever. But if that would have been the case, and they probably would have felt really good about their tackle depth, then I think that, Cam Dewberry, the limitations athletically, pulling and getting out in space, I still say, and something that we didn't see a ton against South Carolina, or at least I didn't notice, and what I kind of want to do, it's going to take a while, but if I find the time, I would love to go back and see how much Alabama was pulling its guards in previous games versus what they did against South Carolina, because I felt like it was less, and I kind of feel like it was a lot less. That's one of the weaknesses, in my opinion, of Jaden Roberts. He's got the athleticism to get out there, but just as far as locking on guys and getting guys blocked, like there was one screen on Saturday where he had to work up to the second level and just didn't have the ability to get the linebacker blocked. He worked over the top, he made the tackle, and it's like, so you didn't see a whole lot as far as getting him out of space. It was more of him working in a phone booth. Defensive lineman, he handled the twist incredibly well. I thought he was amazing on that front. And so from a pass protection standpoint, I thought run blocking, did a good job. But, that's something that if in the future, maybe they try to turn to Jaden, but then all of a sudden you're seeing him play less. It might be because they're wanting to pull more and that's not his strength. What I would have loved to have seen would have been Michael Carroll going to left guard, because if they could have had that right tackle position, I think Michael from a edge, like he played guard in high school, it's probably where he's comfortable. He's trying to learn, kind of in a lot of ways on the fly to play tackle, play in space, deal with SEC edge speed. If you could have had him at guard from a pulling perspective, he's really athletic. He's nasty. He wants to get his hands on those defensive backs and those linebackers. Give him a chance and he will bury people. I think that really could help this offensive line, but they just don't have that guy that they can trust. And with the way Formby's been playing, which has been very up and down, if Carroll can step up and really solidify that position, then you start thinking about, okay, who are our next best guys? Despite the fact that they're limited, it's Dewberry, it's Geno Vandermark. So that's why they say, well, we're kind of loaded up on the interior. And Will Sanders, I don't think that he's ready, but that cat can really provide some juice. If he could come on and earn a bigger snap share, become a little bit more consistent, I think he could be a problem solver at guard as well, which would allow Carroll to stay at tackle. Maybe, you finally get improved play there. I just think that this offense and the way that it's built, you got a bunch of different body types. You got two big guards, big physical guards, work well in phone booths, and they're playing between, with a center in between them that's smaller. He's more athletic. He's not really a mauler type. He's very scrappy and physical, but you get him out in space, which, of course, if you can pull your center, that can compensate for a lack of guard ability to pull. But it's just, I think right now, the way that everything is set up, guys are just missing blocks, and I think that's been pretty critical.
I think in the off season, a couple things about that can make this offensive line better is, I'm assuming Brailsford leaves for the NFL, and of course Jaden, he'll be in the NFL, because he's a senior. I think that Will Sanders may be moving full time to center, assuming he can get the snap down. I think Will Sanders has the makeup to be a tremendous center, but what they've got to figure out is Formby a tackle or a guard? Is Carroll a tackle or a guard? That's what they got to figure out. Where are they best before they can really put together? Because it's kind of hard to imagine next year Formby and Carroll not being among the 5 best. Now, where should they line up? I mean, where can they help us the most? I think that's a challenging question for Coach Cap in the offseason. Is Formby a guard or a tackle? Is Carroll a guard or a tackle? And can Will Sanders or Olas, I think, is a fun dark horse to be the starting center as well. But you're probably going to have to find a center. I'm just assuming Parker's headed to the NFL, and could be a pretty large, ironically, as much as the offensive line struggles a bit, could be a pretty large contingent headed to the NFL. I mean, you could have Brailsford, Jaden Roberts, and Caden Proctor. I think all 3 could get drafted. Maybe even Dewberry gets drafted,
and then Geno will be leaving.
Geno will be leaving, and I don't know whether he gets drafted or not. He'll certainly be in an NFL camp for sure. But I think the other guys could all get drafted. We just played South Carolina. I want to remind people that as much as we spend time talking about it, and they're not great, and they're not elite. And I think sometimes in college football, when a unit's not elite, it gets over-criticized. Alabama's offensive line is not what South Carolina's is. It's not what LSU's is. It's not what Texas's is. I mean, LSU and Texas have a real mess. I don't think, as much as they struggle from time to time, that Alabama's offensive line is a mess. I actually think it's pretty good, especially when you compare it to what's going on at South Carolina, what's going on at LSU, what's going on at Texas. Now, it's not Texas A&M. I think they have the best offensive line in this league. And boy, I think they're scoring 40 points like it's nothing, in part because that offensive line is so good. But yeah, Alabama does not have a mess up front. It's just not elite. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, as evidenced by the fact that a lot of these guys are going to be playing pro football next year.
Well, and that's part of why I start to question, because the individual pieces, it should all be better. I mean, I don't think I thought the offense would stay on schedule more, which would protect the tackles. We all knew that pass protection with the tackles could be a problem, but I thought they'd stay on schedule a little bit more, and that would help protect those guys from opposing pass rushes, from being able to pin their ears back and get after them. That hadn't been the case, especially as much in the last couple of games. But what I will say is Caden Proctor, I mean, he's got a bad combination of, with his size and how much it kind of hinders him. I think he's a phenomenal mover for a guy who's 355 pounds. Phenomenal. But he's still not an adequate mover when you compare him to a 320-pound tackle. You know, someone who's 35 pounds lighter, a lot more nimble on their feet. So the problem is that I think sometimes he tries to overcompensate from the fact that you can turn the corner on him and he oversets, but he also has a problem as far as the inside counter moves. And that is a terrible combination because if you're really trying hard to get out there and seal the edge, the guy's going to feel that as a pass rusher and he's just going to counter inside, spin move inside, whatever. And a lot of times, Proctor's getting beat. Personally, I think that he should come back to Alabama. I think if you had an off season to be healthy, drop weight, get down to 330, 335, that's another 20 to 25 pounds. Maybe you could show NFL teams that you can play tackle on the next level. I personally don't think he's going to be playing tackle on the next level. I don't think this is going to happen, but I think in an ideal world, he returns and they move him inside and let him show NFL teams, hey, this is what I look like at guard. I'm pretty good. If you had, and this was, I was thinking about this, it is possible that Parker Brailsford comes back as well because he's probably making pretty good money. And I just don't think he's going to be like a first-round draft pick. Might be a day two, but the lack of size, he's very limited as far as scheme. That could end up hurting him. If he ended up coming back, the ideal offensive line, in my opinion, would be assuming that Jackson Lloyd takes the next step. It would be Jackson Lloyd at left tackle. It would be Caden Proctor at left guard. It would be Parker Brailsford at center. It would be Will Sanders at right guard. And it would be Michael Carroll at right tackle. Now, that would leave Formby on the outside looking in. Granted, if Parker ended up leaving, maybe you end up having Will Sanders as your center. Maybe you slot Wilkin Formby at right guard. You also, I still am a fan of Joe Ionata. I still think Mal Waldrop is a very underrated player. What I don't like about that is they played tackle in high school. A lot of people thought he was going to convert to center. And from what I've seen, I don't think that he's been doing that. He's played guard and tackle. So it's like
and tackle and not as much center, which is a little surprising, but I think that his transition to center might be easy.
From a pass protection standpoint, and I think he's a little bit of an underrated athlete as far as on that front. So I think you could get into that conversation as well. That would be something else to monitor, but that would be the ideal. We're getting ahead of ourselves as 2026, but for 2025, I mean, I just think that you're going to be dealing with limitations, and that's something that we'll need to continue to talk about. Jimmy, just one final thing. What, in your opinion, what has been the three best games as far as the run game, how the run game has looked?
Well, Monroe, off the top of my head, Monroe, obviously you have to factor in the competition there.
Against power four opponents. And granted, it might not be from a production standpoint. Might be how it looked.
I've been so low. I think the last two, I think Tennessee and Missouri, I felt like they were starting to turn the corner. And I feel like Tennessee and Missouri, I don't know what the overall numbers say because it is a production kind of a game. But I felt like against Tennessee and Missouri, the run game was helping Alabama win. I think it so bottomed out against South Carolina. I'm so down on it right now. It's frankly hard to recall anything good.
Yeah.
But Tennessee and Missouri come to mind for me in terms of like I really felt like okay, now we're starting to show some signs.
Well, to me, by far the two best was Missouri and Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And then Tennessee, Daniel Hill in the second half for sure started to look good. That's where to me, in some ways, you probably saw as many flashes as you did against Georgia. But I think overall with Jam Miller, I thought the flashes started to happen against Georgia, and I was starting to become a little bit encouraged about the run game. But from a production standpoint, I wouldn't say so. But I would say, as far as in my opinion, which I mean, and I think there's an argument to be made for Tennessee, but the three best games that Alabama has looked from a run game perspective against Power Four opponents was Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Georgia. That's also the only three games that Danny Lewis has been healthy and available for. So yes, especially against Vanderbilt and Missouri.
It gets back to my original point about blocking at tight end and going to 11 personnel exclusively, almost exclusively, and that one tight end being Cuevas as being perhaps the biggest problem in terms of generating a run game. I think you're on to something there big time about how when Daniel Lewis is out there, things get a little better.
Once again, I think Caleb Edwards is going to be a really good player in due time.
Yeah.
He's whiffing on blocks quite a bit. I mean, and he's big, and when he can get his hands on you, for the most part, he's pretty solid, but he's whiffing a lot, and he's a true freshman. I'm not he's going to be a really good player. I have no doubt. And all these reps are giving him experience, and he's going to be better for it in the long term. But Daniel Lewis was supposed to be that guy, and he has not been available. And when he has been available, I'm not saying, oh, you get Daniel Lewis and everything's fixed, because you still have so many offensive linemen, so many individual pieces missing blocks. But I think that would be one area that would improve, where sometimes it's the tight ends that's getting beat. And I think Danny Lewis gets beat just a little bit less, especially on those zone blocking plays. I think he's been pretty good as a run blocker in that instance. So I think that's held Alabama back. I don't know what's going on with him, because he ended up missing against South Carolina. He missed again. He didn't play against Tennessee. So, I mean, is he out for the season? I don't think it's necessarily that, but maybe they're giving him more time to heal. I have no idea, but him getting back would certainly, I think, benefit. But as far as fixing the run game, it's going to take guys starting to do their jobs more consistently. They all have upside. They're all doing really good things, but it just seems like every time they try to run the football, one guy just decides this is going to be the snap that I don't get the job done, and that's all it takes. The running backs could see things a little bit better. I think if you had the vertical passing game there, that would help as far as pulling guys out of the box to make it that much easier. But right now, I think that it's really a combination of a lot of factors, and it's something, get the offensive line in a better state, in a better place to be able to work better as a unit. If they can do that post-bye week, I think that would go a long way.
Just want to remind people, offense is so much more difficult than defense for this reason. On defense, you can have one of your 11 can bust. He can either miss his assignment or get beat. On defense, there's 10 other guys that can potentially make up for it. You know, one guy doesn't do his job on defense, you got a chance. One guy on offense doesn't do his job, you're probably pretty much screwed.
Yeah.
You're probably pretty much screwed.
Yep.
Because it's not like, if just to pick on a guy, if Dewberry misses his block, it's not like Brailsford or Proctor can leave what they're doing and go make up for it. It's
That's right.
over. It's over.
That is 100% right.
So now on defense, if Lawson's got the wrong run fit, he's still got Hubbard and Sabb behind him that can clean it up, or Justin Jefferson or some other athlete gets there. But on offense, it just takes one guy. And I think that's largely what we're talking about here. That's not a complete fail as a unit. It's one guy here and one guy there and one guy there. It makes perfect sense. Like I said, I think there's some fans that are just so like, oh, this offensive line is just not good. No, go watch South Carolina, LSU, and Texas. They're not good. They have significant issues, and there's other offensive lines throughout the league as well. Alabama's offensive line is not bad at all. I think overall it's good, and the individual pieces, I think people might be surprised how much the NFL values them.
Yeah, and they just need more consistency. Run stunts have been hurting them pretty bad. They got to be better with that. And it was a strange situation. I didn't feel like watching the game that Ty was like letting the play clock run down like he had. There's not one single time that I can remember against South Carolina where I was like, snap it, snap it, snap it. Like we're all complaining and wanting him to do. I didn't notice that against South Carolina. And I've noticed that against Missouri. I noticed that against Georgia. So I don't know if it was a road. I don't think it was a road thing. Something about that game just felt a little bit off as far as what they were calling. I don't know. I don't know if it was that they were not trying to reveal. I don't want to go that far, because if they're still doing that crap after, as much as we've seen it, surely they're not continuing to do it. But it did feel a little bit different, a little bit off. Maybe that ends up making a difference. But either way, Jimmy, I feel like this has been a productive conversation. I hope people have found it interesting. Bye week, not as much looking ahead to the next opponent. It's more reflecting on Alabama, and hopefully we've given people a lot to think about, and maybe we would love to get your take on things. And if there's something that you disagree with us on, definitely leave it in the comments. I will go back and check. And I know, this is the same way for Jimmy. We're not better than anybody else. They just stuck a microphone in our face and said, talk Alabama football. That's exactly what we're doing. But people bring up great points all the time. We always love the points. So we would love to hear or read y'all's thoughts on it as well. We appreciate you guys so much. Jimmy, I appreciate you. Definitely get on over to roback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 for 20% off your order. And we will talk to you guys soon.